Det var lite vittlamålningen lite. Men det är därför var det så dåligt på att lite riktigt. Ja, nu måste jag tänkte att det var en tag där. Ja, så tänkte jag, men jag vet inte om jag kunde gjort några inställningar. Jag kom till styra denna något särskilt. Varför lyssättningen? Det borde vara mer lys på den. Det hade gjort det. Det borde vara lys här, men jag har inte väldigt mycket. Det är som konfigurerar videon. What happened now? Uansett litt Here we go. Yeah. The video. Am I talking without mic or just? Yeah. Should we close that door? Yeah. Hello, I'm Mika Laitinen from Finland, and I'm a beer writer and a home brewer, and I have studied a lot of different kind of beers. And this Taari Karelian Farmhouse Ale is certainly one of the most exotic beers which I have ever brewed and researched. And as a day job, I work as a mathematician, and I like to solve puzzles, like different kind of problems, and I get excited about the difficulties of understanding. And Taari has been some kind of puzzle for me. I've tried to understand how these exotic techniques can work and what kind of beer these techniques make. Really, by reading the books and looking at old photos, it's really difficult to say. So I have been doing a lot of brewing experimentation to find out this. And we have to start with the cultures of Finland. Roughly, Finland can be divided into 3 different cultures. We have Western Finland, which is has a lot of Scandinavian influence. And there, Sahti is a major farmhouse ale. But then there is also Eastern Finland, where the Sahti is no longer the main farmhouse ale. They make many different kind of beers, and now I'm brewed in Karelia, which is an area divided between Finland and Russia. And then there's also Lapland, but that is mostly beyond the limits of cultivation, so there's no much grain growing, no much brewing traditions there. But, Karelia is not very well defined region because parts of the Karelia are now part of Finland, East, South and North Karelia. And then there's areas Laatokan Karjala, Karjalan Kannas, which used to be part of Finland, but were lost to Russia during World War II. And then there's also these parts which have never been part of the Finnish nation or even kingdom of Sweden. They always have been more in a Slavic Russian area. And my main sources are ethnographic studies, mainly by Matti Räsänen, who wrote a PhD thesis about Finnish farmhouse drinks in the 1960s and 70s. And he used many different ethnographic studies which have been made in different eras, 1930s, 1950s, and he kind of assembled all these studies. And then there's even one 3-minute film about brewing Taari in Karelia. I tried to get it to show it to you, but there's some technical difficulties in showing that. So I think I can post the link later on into my Brewing Nordic site. And then I have been looking into Karelian cookbooks, but these are kind of problematic because the writers of the cookbooks clearly haven't brewed the beer. I can easily see when I look at the recipe that the writer doesn't know how this is going to be brewed. So I have to kind of take pieces from different parts of text, and then I try to combine them into kind of techniques which actually work and make a good beer. And most of my sources are from around Lake Ladoga, which we call Laatokka in Finnish. So it's quite small area where my sources are. But this kind of beer has many similar relative beers in a very large area in the Baltic states and in Estonia, Latvia. But let's look at the whole ideology of Finnish West and East farmhouse brewing. So West is a Scandinavian influenced brewing. It's a culture which you all know when you are here. And in West, beer is usually brewed in a dedicated place for brewing. And there's dedicated brewing equipment, big buckets, and so on. But in the Eastern Finnish house, there's no any brewery. The beer is made in a kitchen, mostly with standard cooking equipment. And this means that in the West, people can make big amounts of beer with big equipment. And in the East, people brew very often with the small brewing equipment. And in the West, people are also more geared to making malts from barley or rye. They have often big and good facilities to make malt, but in the East, malt is like extra. They make it in a small scale and then use very big quantities of unmalted grains, usually rye, sometimes oats. And the fermentation is also different in the West and East Finnish brew houses, because in West, it is beers are usually fermented with house yeast, which doesn't make beer go sour. The sourness is a critical flaw. People don't want to drink sour beer. But in the East, people can ferment with a spontaneous fermentation or use a sourdough starter to make a beer. And for them, sour flavor is kind of natural. They typical flavor in their foods and drinks. And it's not a flaw for Eastern Finnish farmhouse brewing. And I'm going to talk about Taari, which is can be classified as an oven beer. And Eastern Finnish houses usually have this kind of very massive oven. It is the heart of the whole house. It is used for heating the house and cooking all foods. They make a lot of different kind of foods with the oven. There's a certain kind of order which they use to make a food and beer. They first bake breads, then make stews, and in the evening they start to bake for brewing. And this is this photo is from Karelia, 1894, quite old photo. And it's from Vienna, Karelia, which has never been in part of the Finnish or Swedish territory. And now let's go more closely to Karelian Taari. So it is an oven beer, and it is made from this kind of very thick baked loaves. It can be described as a baked mash, but it's not exactly a mash. And anyway, the whole language is different, and the brewing vocabulary is different. They don't speak about mash or malt. They have totally different words for all these brewing things. And this Taari is both daily food and also feast drink. And I served there in a whole Taari, which was around 3% of alcohol. I think that used to be quite typical alcohol percent, because this technique doesn't make easily strong beer. It's more like making something like 0 to 5% alcohol beer. I will explain later on what this very big and weird alcohol range means. And this kind of oven beer is related clearly to Keptinis of Lithuania and also Setoolu of Estonian Russian border. But in Setoolu they use also this kind of baked loaves of rye, but they add sugars, which is a modern kind of extension to the old tradition. That is one of the major difficulties in researching this kind of beers, because the brewers have replaced the old way of making sweetness from grains with the sugar bought from shops. But my major part of the research and major part of solving this puzzle is to figure out how people have made sugars out of grains without going into the shop and buying sugars. And Keptinis is quite close to this beer, except Keptinis brewers they use malts, and Taari brewers use small amount of malt and then a lot of unmalted grains. So I will talk about more it later. And as far as I know, this kind of Taari has been last brewed before World War II. This photo is from Karelia 1928, and my last sources of alive culture are from 1939. So that's not completely lost tradition, because there's plenty of photos and books to read about it. But I haven't met anyone alive who could even tell what Taari should be tasted like. So there's a lot of guesswork and indirect conclusions in brewing this beer. Yes, this is how Lithuanian Keptinis is brewed. They make a mash and put it either in a metal jars or clay jars, and then in the evening, after they have baked all the breads and stews, then they put in this mash, and next morning they wake up and took out this kind of dark caramelized mash from the oven. It's the same principle as in Taari, but in Keptinis they use more malt, and Taari they use more unmalted grains. And there's also some Eastern Finnish foods which are related to this kind of brewing. So we have this kind of sweet rye dessert called the mammi, which is kind of sweetened rye without any sugars. The sugars are made by enzymatic reactions to the rye, and basically you could take this dessert food mammi, mix it with water, and brew beer with it. So then it would be very much like Taari. And Taari can be made in it doesn't have to be baked like a bread-shaped thing. It can be also baked in a clay jars like this. But the main thing is to bake the grains in the oven and make the unmalted grains into sweet porridge. which can be then diluted and fermented. And with Taari brewing, there's only one specific brewing equipment. All the other brewing stuff is just a normal like kitchenware, small pots and so on. But the Taari bucket is wooden bucket with you lay some sticks on the bottom to remain flow area, and there's also hole on the bottom where you can draw the beer later on. And when you first start to brew Taari, you clean this with the juniper infusion. Juniper is the main disinfectant in the whole northern Europe, where juniper grows. It is always used for cleaning wooden stuff. Not also only in brewing, but also in cheese making and all kind of foods. And then you put a very thick layer of straws on the bottom, on the top of those wooden sticks. The purpose of the wooden sticks is to keep the flow area open. And the purpose of the straws is to act as a filter later on. And then you need to start baking. This is how I did in the beer which I served to you in a hall. So I kind of made a very thick porridge from unmalted and malted rye. There was more unmalted rye in the porridge. And it takes several hours to get at this point. The porridge should be made very slowly in uprising temperatures, and then when the porridge tastes sweet, then you can start piling it up into bread shape things. I try to avoid speaking about breads because then people confuse about eating bread. This kind of thing is not supposed to be eaten. It's brewed only for brewing. So this is not like a kvass beer, which is made from ordinary bread. This is completely different, only baked for brewing and not for eating. So at this point, this rye dough is very sticky and tastes sweet, but I think it contains some starches. It's not fully converted, so it's half converted. Yeah.
The holes, are those decorative or do they have a function?
Yeah, they have a function. Before putting them into oven, you make a few holes with your thumb and then fill them with water. And that avoids cracking of the surface. Because you want bake them so that the crust is very hard, but inside there is a moist, sugary grains. And this is after several hours of baking. Usually I bake the breads for 2 or 3 hours in 200 degrees with the electric oven. I don't have that kind of fancy Karelian food-fired oven. And then I leave the breads overnight in the oven. And this is the structure of the baked rye Taari loaf. The outer surface is very dark and roasty and crisp. It gives a lot of color and flavor to the beer, but the inner part of the bread is very moist, sweet, sticky, and sugary from malt sugars. And the brewing starts by breaking these loaves of rye into the tari bucket above the straws. It's just a coarse grind with the hands. And then you pour in water. Usually it's not hot water, it's just lukewarm water. And then you ferment this whole thing without any filtration. The filtration comes later on. So it's like in ancient Egypt or Sumeria, it's fermenting mash. And there are several ways to add a ferment into this kind of beer. It's really like weird sayings about this, because some sources say that in later times yeast was used. And earlier method was just to wait for the fermentation happen, like spontaneous fermentation. I have brewed tari for 5 times and I have always used yeast. So I don't know what the spontaneous fermentation would bring into this beer. That's my next research step, but it's kind of difficult to grasp the idea what kind of flavor the spontaneous fermentation would bring, because even with the standard yeast, this drink is highly exotic. And in a beer which I served you in a hall, it was fermented with the Lithuanian Keptinis yeast. So it's kind of related, but still for Karelians it was a modern step to use those specific brewing yeast. The fermentation takes something like 2 to 4 days, and then you can start drinking the beer by just pulling out the tap from the bottom. So it gets filtered right before drinking. And there's a very specific way to get all the sugars out from the grains, because you drink this bucket empty, then tap it again, pour in water, and wait a day, for example, then you can draw out a second weaker beer. And this is done in several recycles. There's this one is the first strong tari, but not very strong, more like a 3 to 5%. Then the second, third, fourth, and fifth quarter of tari. And at home I experimented with this, and the first tari was similar what I served here. Or actually, perhaps it was more like a mixture of first and second tari. And the second tari, when I poured in the next water, it felt like a very mild but still pleasant drink. It was more like a could be drink by children. It didn't have much alcohol. The first draw was kind of I wasn't sure if it's too strong for children. Perhaps something like 3 to 4 to 5%. It was more like an adult drink. The second one was very mild but pleasant tasting. And the third water of tari was it felt like a good working drink, but the taste wasn't good anymore. It felt like I wouldn't drink for taste. Only for get some energy and sports drink and work. And fourth drink I didn't even try because I didn't believe that it can make a good drink. But there's a lot of sayings about this different waters in old ethnographic books. That if something is really worthless, people can say it's like a fifth water on the top of Taari, and then even seventh water on the top of Taari. And also the ethnographic book says that the spent grains were so used that not even the animals ate the spent grains. So this totally took all the sugars out from the grains. It's very efficient way of brewing in that sense. Although this is not a very good way to make a very strong beer. If you're trying to fill this bucket with too much grain, then you might not get anything out when you open the tap. It might stuck. So in my mind, this is more like better suited for making a mild beer. And this makes it very difficult to classify the beer because for me, beer is alcoholic drink made from grains by fermentation. But Taari can be both alcoholic drink and non-alcoholic drink, and it's kind of difficult to explain. And also, when I read sources about Karelian Taari, I cannot always tell whether that drink was alcoholic or non-alcoholic drink. That's a very big complication in understanding. Like Lars likes to map different areas of beer into his maps, and then he asks, was that an alcoholic drink or non-alcoholic drink? And I have to say, I don't know. I perhaps both. And so this was usually drink as a daily drink, and often this kind of we call it tuoppi or kannu pint. It was all day sitting in a table of the farmhouse, and anyone who felt thirsty or lacking energy could take a sip from the pint. It was there all day. But Taari was also used for feast drink. But I think even then it didn't have very much alcohol. So I'm not sure how drunk the celebration people were. And I don't know how they brewed big quantities of Taari. I think when they had weddings, many houses made Taari. So perhaps at least 5 houses made their own Taari, and then they sort of gathered around and made a wedding drink. Because on the other hand, Karelians have a very long and complicated traditions of weddings and celebrations. So they kind of needed a lot of food and drink for celebrations. And this is my impression what Taari should taste like and look like. It should have a dark brown color. I'm not sure how easy it is from that image to get idea of the color. My Taari in a whole, it was slightly paler than I would like to have, because I think the dark brown baked flavor is what makes the Taari special. That Taari was slightly unbaked, because I tried to make a lot of Taari for this festival, and I made huge piles of rye. They weighed more than 3 kilos each. and then I couldn't bake them so dark. And it was slightly too pale. And as you saw, it was highly viscous. It's like a motor oil. And that's part of the character, but I have also had varied results depending on how I brew. I have brewed this kind of beer 5 times, and each time it's slightly different. Also, this viscosity varies a lot. And I don't know exactly why. I think it's the porridge making step before baking is really important how it is done. And there's clearly grainy and baked flavor in good Taari. And the old ethnographic books, they don't say much about the flavor of Taari. They just, well, in old times, people didn't analyze beers. They just said that sweet taste, sour taste, sweet and sour. That's the most thing what they say about beer in old books. But the old books clearly say that the aroma of Taari bread is fantastic. The house fills the whole house with a fantastic baked dry aroma. And when I made this, I made that drink last Friday, so it's 8 days old now. I made the Taari loaves last Thursday. My wife couldn't sleep very well because the aroma was so intense in the house. It was a kind of a good aroma, but too intense for sleeping well. And I think there is this Taari which I served you was quite smooth in flavor. Not there wasn't any rough edges, but in some versions I have had kind of nice tannic and husk and straw flavors, kind of, which I usually don't get in any other kind of beer, but in this kind of beer I can get some grain husk flavor in a positive way. And I would say that Taari is certainly acquired taste, which means that when you drink it first time, it's not instantly a big hit, but you can learn to appreciate that. I think that's what's happening to me, that more I brew Taari, more I begin to like it. But the first time drinking Taari is not like a big explosion of aromas and tastes. And well, but that is also part of the excitement because it's so different flavor and aroma. And all the techniques are so different. And but there is a way to use these techniques to create really powerful beer. I have made modern beer inspired by Taari. This is I brewed this as a Christmas beer last year. I took 25% of baked Taari loaves and 75% of standard barley malt, and I made a standard boiled wort beer from that. And it had a huge caramel, dark caramel flavors. I've never tasted so caramelly beer in my life. It was really almost too much baked rye and caramel in one beer. So I think next time I will use 20%. And well, people liked it very much. But it also it was kind of beer that had to be drank very fresh because the caramel started to oxidize. That's why I don't usually use caramel malts because they oxidize faster than normal beer. But when it was its best, it was really powerful, strong, baked, caramelly beer, and really kind of modern beer, but still very exotic. And my research will continue on Taari. I have to do a lot of more brewing experiments, and I will write a full story about Taari into my website, Brewing Nordic. I have some things in my Viking-Age Brew about Taari, but this is more about Sahti. And I also have a Facebook, Instagram pages. Twitter I only used as an outpost to announce the most important writings. The Brewing Nordic is certainly going to have some more Taari information in the future. Okay, thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
With the baking, does Finland have much of a history with the milling of the grains rather than the baking? Because the milling, breaking down the structure, would greatly accelerate the extraction of the sugars in that. You first have to have the tradition of the milling.
Yes, the books clearly say that it should be grinded flour, which is used for that baking. But I think it has to be very coarse grind, otherwise it's too difficult to lauter and filter. Yeah.
Thinking about the sourness of Taari, in particular the second or third and the fourth.
Yeah.
Whether increased sourness.
Yeah, I think in the past it increased, but I did the drinking so fast that it didn't have time to go sour. It was, I think it was something like 5 days. And also I kept the Taari packet in a cold. And that prevented it going sour.
So not in the whole way by before.
No. And the book say that after fermentation you can put it in a cold place, Taari packet, but it doesn't say that put Taari packet in a cold. So I think people use both room temperature and cold storage. I think the sourness is really interesting because with spontaneous fermentation, it's difficult to make high alcohol beers fast. In my experience, what happens when you get the spontaneous fermentation, you get very fast 2% alcohol, but after that it halts and gets sour, and then after weeks or months, then you can get more alcohol. Sort of sourness is halting the fermentation.
Yeah, so I know in Karelia they would, like you mentioned, use sourdough for baking, for example, rye bread.
Yeah.
Do you have like sources that dictate the recipes to use the same sourdough as in baking bread for brewing Taari? You mentioned like a spontaneous fermentation and sourdough starters for brewing.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a lot of old sourdough starters in Finland. At least tens of very old. Some have been in a family for more than 100 years. But I don't know if there's any Karelian broad. I'm sure there is, but well, in the Second World War, 400,000 Karelians came from the Karelia to Finnish mainland and settled in different areas. So I think I'm pretty sure that some of them brought the sourdough starter, but I don't know where they are. Yeah.
You also made was very clear about different, like this is not bread as in crust.
Yeah.
This is, but in the same manner, the distinction between crust or like solid everyday drink for the third or fourth serving, it kind of becomes harder to distinguish.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about that?
One thing which I could mention that in Estonia they have a drink called Taari, almost the same word, but they use it in a different meaning. They first brew the strong feast beer kotuolu, then drain the water tub. But then they put the tap on, top it up with water, and the spentment will start fermenting spontaneously. And then after a day or two, they can open the tap and the spent grains have fermented into a sour drink. So that's kind of partly related to this Taari, but also a bit different because it's not baked and it's the second drink of the feast drink. When I was in Estonian island Saaremaa in 2015, I was able to taste this kind of Estonian Taari. So there was one brewer who made it by his tradition, not just a curiosity or experiment. It was his tradition, and he offered us some this kind of Estonian Taari to drink. And it was like a bit like a drinkable yogurt, quite acidic. Nice, refreshing drink, but probably not alcoholic